Today I would like to talk about Flutter Flow's null problem. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this screen. Unfortunately, we see it a lot. It happens when we download JSON. So basically whenever we go to an API and we try to get data from that API and we download a JSON document, if there's a null, it often generates this red screen. And there are a lot of posts about this on the internet. People have a lot of frustration dealing with it, and I think I not only found out the reason why it's happening, but I was able to find a solution that's hopefully gonna help a lot of you guys out there. It's certainly helping me. So let's see the situation where this happens. So I want to make sure I give you guys context so you can see how this problem occurs. So let's say here's a screen of my supplement tracker app, and basically I have in this screen I'm just downloading a JSON document. It just shows the history of what pills you took, and it has a list box, and the list box goes out on the internet to an API, and from that API, this is my REST API that I developed, and I'm downloading the data as JSON. What you have taken. So that's the context, right? The way list boxes work is you do an API call, which I did here. So you can define an API, right? And then then you generate dynamic children. And when you generate dynamic children, that's when you get back, and then you get back a JSON document. Now that JSON document can be null, but that's not the problem. The problem is that it can also come back in all kinds of weird ways. Like, so I just wanted to show you guys, I'm referencing this function here. Which is what I'm using to deal with this null problem, right? Because normally you would think you should be able to just assign the JSON value that came back the document to your list box and you'd be done, but that's not like that because it can come back as null. That's why I use a processing function, which is a custom function that I wrote. Okay, so now I go to that custom function. It's here in this screen, in the custom code screen, and that custom function, the first thing I tried to do was check what actually comes back. Is it null? When it comes back null, that's actually a good thing, because null, we can use Dart's null chaining syntax, the question mark syntax, to chain accessing values in the JSON document. It's relatively clean, but sometimes it comes back like this, like quote null quote null quote. It's actually quite messy. Like if you guys look at if you do like here, you can actually push to a repository. I'm sure you guys know how to set this up. Maybe I do another video about that, but it's quite easy to set up a repository for your project. Then you push to a repository, and then you can look at it with IntelliJ, and you can just see how messy the JSON handling is in Flutter. It is just unbelievable, really. Like there are sometimes it's a string, sometimes it's not a string, sometimes it's they have conversions where they actually convert they have two strings after one after the other when they get a JSON. So the problem with that is that you end up with things like quote null quote. So I was trying to check for all of these, but I was looking at what they do, because obviously the Flutter team has to deal with this problem too. And what they do is they, instead of doing all these things that you guys see commented out here, because I found a better solution, they wrote a function which is very handy called maybe from map. So let's say you get here's here's my custom function signature. When you would define something as coming back as JSON, so when you pick your document, your argument type as when you're defining your argument type and you say JSON, it's actually going to put in dynamic. So dynamic is what we're really dealing with. That's the Dart type. JSON is the Flutter pretty name for it only. Dynamic is the Dart type. So when something comes back dynamic, what the Flutter team does is they use their maybe from map function. Now, maybe from map function, you can find that in the source code for dosing taken struct. Just like from map, this is also in like you can find this in the source code as well, and we can access it. Unfortunately, maybe from map is not accessible. I don't know why. I don't know why from map is accessible, but maybe from map is not. But maybe from map does it. It bypasses all these things. It does code that that just it checks if it's a map. So instead of checking for all these null, what kind of null it is, it checks if it's a map. And you can do that. Like I actually copied this, what you guys see here. This maybe from map. I copied it out of the source code. So what you do is in every function when you need to access JSON, you look at what structure you want to convert it to, and you put that here as the return type, and you just copy these 3 lines in there, and you'll be in the business. That's all you need to do. I would like to also show you guys where I found these goodies in the code base that the Flutterflow team wrote to deal with this problem. If you push to repo, then you can look at it with IntelliJ, because you can set up IntelliJ with Git and pull the code, and then you go into the structure you're interested in, and each of these structures are defined when you define a data type in Flutterflow. It creates a separate file, and each structure is defined in its own individual file. So they're nicely separated, and in that you will find all these handy functions how to deal with this really complicated kind of system of sometimes a null being a string, and sometimes it's a null string, sometimes it's a string, all kinds of things. They have all these functions to deal with it, and it will help you kind of keep your sanity, because you don't have to deal with it yourself. And this is where I found this really handy function called maybe from map. So like I said, from map is available. I don't know if it's a version issue between what Flutterflow is using, or I don't know. I can't explain it. From map seems to be available. Maybe from map wasn't. What I did was I simply copied these 3 lines and I put it into my custom code. So that's where I got that from. And then you can write code. You don't have to check for all these different nulls. So I will even delete this, because it's just messy. And all we are checking for is using oops, we can delete that, right? We can delete that, right? So all we are checking for, maybe from map is checking if data is map, right? So I'm getting my next dosing JSON, and my next dosing JSON is a dynamic, which just means it's JSON, and I'm checking if the data type of that is map, which is Dart's version of a parsed JSON document. If it is, then I'm working with it, and that implies that it's not one of the weird null values. That's what the Flutter team seems to be doing, and maybe I show later their code, and I think it's really handy, and I really wanted to use it, but it's not accessible. So we have to copy these 3 lines here. Now, if you don't have a structure defined, like those in stake and struct, I have defined for that kind of data structure, the document that comes back, then you copy these 2 lines. So you have to use one of these 2 things. And then you can start coding like this, because what these do is they force everything to a proper null. Once you have proper nulls, once you can go through a JSON document and follow the chain of values like fields and so on, in a way that everything is either null or there's a value in it, then you can write pretty clean code. The reason why it was not possible was because sometimes string came back, sometimes, like what I showed you guys earlier. So this is removing that problem. And then what you write when you write code, what you say is, first you say, so I'm using cast to map or null. That's because I don't have a type defined for my big document. So this next door in JSON is I don't have a document, a type defined in my data types. So I'm using the cast to map or null, which is the generic version. And then I put a question mark after it. So make sure that it's not null, right? That the map is there. And then I specify the field that I care about, so in case that's a list. And because it's a list, I'm going to map through that list. And I have to do this again for every item in the list, because every item is also a dynamic, right? It's also JSON. But here I'm using maybe from map. The reason is because for that I do have those doesn't take an struct defined. Ideally you have a structure defined, but you probably won't have it for everything. So that's why I'm showing both versions, the generic version and the one that has a type defined. And then you can just write everything as a simple transformation chain, and it bypasses the entire null problem. You never see that red screen again. So that's the solution I use, and the reason why it's working again is because every time you could have that problem using one of these 2 code snippets, you guys can see it's checking if it's a map. So if it's one of the weird nulls, it automatic, and after that there's a question mark, right? So after my cast to map or null, there's a question mark. The chain will only continue if it's not null. After the maybe from map, there's a question mark. The chain will only continue if it's not null. And these lines guarantee that we will get a proper null if it's not a map, if the map is not there. So that's why it works. That's why you will not see the red screen. So to recap, because this was quite a long way of describing how to solve this problem, here's a list, a simple list to remember. The way you solve this problem, the red screen associated with null values in your JSON document, is that whenever you get something from an API, you define a custom function for it to deal with it, as opposed to just trying to assign the JSON or parts of the JSON tree to your widgets. You define a custom function. In that custom function, you add either this line if you have a type defined, or you add this generic version if you don't have a data type defined for that particular map or node in your JSON tree that you downloaded. And then after that, you can write a transformation chain in Dart's style of using question marks to guarantee that everything in the chain is not going to be null. If you follow these kinds of steps, these couple of steps, that's all you need to do. Hopefully that is nice, short and sweet. Good luck.